this meeting to order. Mike, would you handle the pledge tonight?
Sure.
This is volunteer Mike from the library.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Will you please remain standing? Moment of silence. Brave men and women that protect us on a day-to-day basis, local, township, national, overseas, whatever they might be. Thank them for what they've done, and thank those that have given the ultimate with their lives. Thank you.
I'd like to announce that this meeting is being live streamed. We're going to move public comment on non-agenda items to the end of the meeting. We have no emergency services reports, no financial report, so we'll move on to approval of the minutes and treasurer's report. Does anyone have any comments? Is there a motion?
So moved.
Madam Chair, I'll make a motion that we approve the minutes for October 15th and October 22nd with those revisions that may have been emailed to staff.
Is there a second?
Second. Sorry.
Any comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Move on to the, it's approved, we move on to the treasurer's report.
Has everybody had a chance to review our invoices that we would be approving tonight for November 7th? And this is really, if you look at the treasurer's report, it's October 10th to November 7th.
That long period.
It is a very long period because of off time. So if anybody has any questions, now's the time. With no questions, Madam Chair, I would ask for a motion from the board that we graciously accept the receipts and pay the bills as listed on our register once approved.
Second.
Any comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Report is approved. There are no public hearings, so we'll go on to old business. CZ Woodworking Conditional Use Decision. Ryan?
Thank you, Madam Chair. As the agenda suggests, this evening the board will render a decision on the conditional use application of Christopher Zampano for CZ Woodworking LLC. As many of you know, substantive hearings on the application were held on July 9th, August 13th, September 5th, and September 11th, 2019. Following the close of the evidentiary record on September 11th, 2019, based upon direction from the board, a draft decision and order was prepared and circulated. The 28-page decision and order, which is comprised of findings of facts, conclusions of law, and discussion, has been finalized. With that said, Supervisor Carmen Batavio will now read aloud only the order portion.
Thank you. I would like to thank Ryan and Kristen. Their service for this long process has been invaluable. Now, the 12th day of November, 2019, the Board of Supervisors of East Goshen Township hereby determines the following. The board hereby approves the application to allow applicant to operate the proposed woodworking business as a home occupation from the property located at 1422 Ardley Circle, Westchester, PA 19380, East Goshen Township, Chester County, Pennsylvania, pursuant to sections 249-E, parenthesis 1, 240-31, and 240-32, period J of the East Goshen Township zoning ordinance of 1997 as amended. Such approval is conditioned upon applicant complying with the following conditions. Number one, applicant and his successors and assigns in interest to the property shall be strictly bound by A, all representations, testimony, and evidence made by or on behalf of the applicant at public conditional use hearings conducted on the application on June 18th, July 9th, August 13th, September 5th, and September 11th, 2019. Whether or not express reference is made to said representations, comments, testimony, and evidence in this decision and order, and B, this decision and order including but not limited to all of the foregoing conditions as approval. 2, the entire woodworking operation shall be limited to 500 square feet of floor area enclosed entirely within the first story of the detached accessory structure located on the property. The 500 square foot area must be demarcated using non-movable walls to be inspected by the township zoning officer, parentheses, in accordance with the ordinance section 240-32-J, parentheses 3, parentheses 4, parentheses 5. 3, applicant shall maintain any and all existing acoustical absorption treatments around the windows, doors, and walls of the accessory structure, along with any and all existing fiberglass batten posts on the ceiling. 4, the home occupation shall be permitted to operate Mondays through Fridays between the hours of 7 a.m. and 7 p.m. The home occupation shall not operate on Saturdays or Sundays, nor shall it operate on the following holidays: New Year's Day, Martin Luther King Day, President's Day, Good Friday, Memorial Day, Independence Day, Labor Day, Columbus Day, Veterans Day, Thanksgiving, the day after Thanksgiving, Christmas Eve, and Christmas Day. 5, power tools, i.e., those woodworking tools powered by battery, electricity, and/or air, shall only be operated by applicant between the hours of 10 a.m. and 4 p.m., Monday through Fridays, but may not be operated on all of the holidays listed in condition number 4. When using power tools, doors and windows of the accessory structure shall be closed. 6, applicant shall not conduct a general contracting business nor any home-based business from, out of, or on the property. Excuse me. 7, applicant or successors entitled shall be the only employee of the home occupation. The home occupation shall have no additional paid or unpaid employees, volunteers, assistants, interns, apprentices, or trainees. Number 8, no metalworking, masonry, welding, or furniture stripping shall be permitted as part of the home occupation. Number 9, applicant shall update the home occupation's website, parentheses, czwoodworking.com, or any subsequent and/or additional website, and a parentheses, within 60 days of the date of this order, and shall therefore maintain it to reflect CZ woodworking operations as hereby permitted, consistent with the testimony and evidence presented by and on the behalf of the applicant during the hearing. Additionally, all subsequent advertisements and social media posts shall accurately reflect CZ Woodworking's operation as hereby permitted and limited, consistent with the testimony and evidence by and on behalf of the applicant during the hearing. Number 10, there shall be no outside storage, parentheses, whether exposed or enclosed, and the parentheses of materials or products associated in any way with the woodworking operation. Such prohibition includes the use of storage pods and sheds. 11, any lighting associated with the home occupation shall be in accordance and compliance with all applicable provisions of the Township Code. 12, if applicant intends to install a sign advertising the home occupation, it must comply with the ordinance section 240-32, parentheses 6, parentheses M, as in Mary, The home occupation shall not feature the signage depicted in applicant's hearing exhibit A13. Number 13, there shall be no in-person customer interaction or direct retail sales occurring on the property. 14, the home occupation shall not have a design center nor showroom at the property which features products made by applicant. 15, applicant shall not utilize any computer numerical control, parentheses, CNC, end of parentheses, machines for the home occupation. At all times while conducting the number 16, I'm sorry. At all times while conducting the home occupation, applicant shall comply with all applicable federal, state, local licenses and permits necessary and or required for operating as a professional woodworker. Applicant shall provide the township with a copy of all required state licenses and permits, as well as all licenses and permit renewals. 17, applicant shall accept the conditions of approval within 15 days of this order by sending written notice of acceptance addressed to the board. If applicant does not unconditionally accept the conditions within 15 calendar days, the application is denied and the board retains jurisdiction of the application to subsequently adopt findings of fact and conclusions of law in support of such denial. The end.
Thank you, Mr. Batavio. At this time, it's now appropriate for a member of the board to make a motion regarding the decision and order.
Madam Chairman, I would make a recommendation or a motion to the board that we accept the order and approve the application with the 17 conditions that were just outlined in past conversations.
I'll second that motion.
Any discussion on the board? All in favor?
Aye.
Motion is approved. Thank you, Ryan.
Thank you.
Okay. At this point, we're going to take a 5-minute recess so that we can sign these agreements, and then we will start the meeting again.
I was thinking the same Oh, really?
I have one more comment from the speaker.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
So they're very excited to see So they met at Fenway Park. And really nice. I don't know where they went.
No, we didn't have to make the arms today. That plane. Sometimes we distract the family.
Yeah, right.
I just think our paper is a great place.
Actually,
What describes?
Michael has his slide.
They were gonna show us. So they put in. We don't know years. Or they kick taxes in their camp.
We'll call the meeting back to order. Next on the agenda, we're going to consider the revised Paoli Pike T&D ordinance. This is a new draft that was revised based on comments from the last meeting and another review by the Township Planning Commission. It reduced the amount of higher density residential and eliminated the build-to line. Is there any comments from the board?
I would comment that the public comment that we received was very beneficial. It was directly translated into these amendments that are now before us, the revised draft. And was reviewed and discussed at the Planning Commission meeting, that was last week. And the Planning Commission subscribed a motion to recommend the ordinance be processed and proceeded through public hearing process. But I think importantly, the board and the Planning Commission did listen to the public comment, and I think it made substantial changes to the ordinance to reflect that public comment.
Is there a motion?
Yes, Madam Chair, I'd like to move that the board authorize the staff to forward the T&D ordinance to the Chester County Planning Commission for review and comment, and set a hearing date for formally considering this ordinance for adoption.
And I'll second that motion.
Any discussion from the board? Any comments from the floor? We're not going to discuss the whole thing. This was done in the past, but do you have any specific comments? If you do, excuse me, if you have comments, you need to go up to the mic, give your name and your address.
Mary Ann Lipton, 1680 East Strasburg Road, Westchester, PA 19380. I just want to know what, where you can see the plan for this, and when is the public meeting going to be?
Well, we are going to decide on a date for the public meeting now. That is not yet decided.
Okay, any plans on the internet, or what's the overlay?
When they,
Posted on the website.
And where is that under?
So-
I looked, I mean, the website's not very user friendly.
I can help you find that if you give me your email address. I'm happy to link it for you better, but it is on the website under planning documents.
You want me to pull up the website?
You can pull it up if you want.
That's a good idea.
Sure.
I just want to know what you're talking about this time. I don't know what you're talking about.
No, this is an ongoing plan for the last almost a year now. So little more than a year.
Do a second, so.
And then they're gonna have a public in the school or something, or just here?
It'll probably be here. It'll be a hearing to formally consider the adoption of the new ordinance.
So.
Let me- yeah.
So I'm on the website, planning and under services, right? Planning and zoning? Or is it under about a special?
Planning documents.
Planning documents, you're there, planning documents.
About us. Planning and zoning. There it is. And then Goshenville traditional.
I'm just,
Previous version. That
yeah,
was the previous version, so we'll get this newest version up as soon as it's in its adoptable form.
I'm just gonna read to you the 5 changes that are reflected in this revised ordinance. The changes included removing all residential uses from the TND1.
Wait, no.
That's the old, excuse me, that's
That's an old one.
that's the, okay. We have the one in, current, we have a current
Get a current copy,
summary.
to my knowledge.
He doesn't even know what he voted on.
The document that we worked on and came up with, basically took apartments out of the TND one, took townhouses out of the TND one, and eliminated built-to homes. And in the TND two, you're allowed to have single-family single-family detached homes and single-family semi-detached homes. And the only residential in TND one is now dwelling units above ground for commercial. So if somebody wanted to build a strip store and put commercial dwelling units over top of it, they could do that. And there's a limited 10 so if they had a shopping center, had 1 acre, and they can work it out with the footprint and the parking, et cetera, they can see where they can have 10 units on the second and third floor over top of a commercial establishment. It would have to be over top of a commercial establishment. Right, yeah.
That was the marijuana store.
Alright.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Dan True at 1430 Grand Oak Lane. Rick, you just fixed what you started to say that was wrong. I just want to make sure everybody here understands what happened. I came to the planning commission meeting last Tuesday night. There was a grand total of 6 people out here, 3 township supervisors, myself, my wife, and another gentleman here. So there was 6 people in attendance. Originally, you started off, it was exactly what you just said, Rick. They were talking about removing all the residential from the TND1 district, which I think a good chunk of, I think if you did that, a good chunk of the residents would be okay with that. And then as the meeting progressed, gradually the residential stuff crept back in. And you're right, it ended up being, instead of the possibility of apartment buildings that were pure apartment buildings, that went away. But now you could still have a commercial building with apartments above it. The density of the apartments above it went down from 16 units per acre to 10 units per acre. It's still, the setbacks, I gotta be honest with you, I sat there and listened to it, and I have a pretty good background in this kind of stuff, and I still didn't understand the difference between the setback and the building line and so forth. I know it's still 15 feet, I just don't know.
The old
15 feet from
The
what.
old TND1 required a 15, it required a build-to line. The revised says the minimum is 15, so you can do it you can build to line or back. So it would stagger buildings. There were some concerns about, the canyon effect of everything on a build to line. This would allow people to either build to line or put a setback in.
Right, and
That's
then
the difference.
a final piece of it was that we want the parking to be in the back of the buildings and not in front of the buildings.
That's always been there.
Yeah,
That's not a change.
The factor that, what that causes though, is that means the buildings out of necessity have to end up closer to the road than they would be if the parking was in front of the road.
It's actually behind or beside the buildings.
Okay, but that's, the reality is, as I watch the folks in the planning commission talking about this, I design electrical panels and I'm trying to put components inside of a fixed space. And what I heard at that planning commission meeting sounded to me like people trying to find a way to shove 10 pounds of stuff into a 5-pound enclosure. There was, if we do this, we're gonna run out, it's gonna be too small here, too small there. I mean, they're really trying to cram it in. It just seems, I still feel like, I greatly appreciate the reduction, eliminating the apartments and reducing it from 16 per acre down to 10 per acre. That's a fantastic move in the right direction. I'd still like to see, I mean, I think if you took the residential out completely, and I understand some of you think that it's essential to the plan, but if you took the residential out completely and kept everything else, I think it'd be fine with most of the residents. But as long as you're leaving residential in there, you're just trying to cram too much stuff into a small space. And I think there's going to be unintended consequences of that beyond changing the character of the center of the town. So that's my input, but
Thank you.
thank you for the progress
Thank
so
you.
far. Thank you.
We have a lot
Maria
to do.
Vinyl, 210 Will Drive, Westchester, 19380. I have a pretty basic question. Number one, I would be against any residential in there. I want to see all the residential go. But to take a step back, I'm not understanding why you think we need this. What is the benefit to us as a community?
From when I started working, volunteering in the township 40 years back, we have always been talking about the benefit of having a town center. Now that we are going to have a trail where people are going to be able to walk or ride a bike through Paoli Pike. A year ago or 2 years ago with our when we did our comprehensive plan in 2015, we decided that this was the time to start trying to have a town center. And it's not going to be like a Malvern town center or a Westchester town center, a purely East Goshen town center that has some stores, that doesn't have 5-story buildings.
I don't understand what you mean by, what kinds of stores?
It depends on the owner of the property, what type of store they're gonna put in. It's not going to be it's not gonna, we're only allowing 40 feet in height, which if you think of our residential areas, our R2 allows 35 feet in height for a building. So we're not gonna have anything that's huge, but we'll have small stores. If someone wants to put an apartment above the store, they can do that.
But I'm still not understanding where the call is from the members of the community to develop this town center. You may have thought about it 40 years ago.
It's in the comprehensive plan that was approved in 2015, and again in the Paoli Pike master plan that was
But I
approved.
think you're dealing with a different set of people now. I think it
well,
would be clear.
We were at that time, we were dealing with the people that came out when we talked about the comprehensive plan, and dealing with the people that came out when we talked about the Paoli Pike master plan. So.
You're kind of tying it into this trail, which I think, quite frankly, there's a lot of people in the community that also can't figure out why the hell we're putting the trail in.
Well,
But,
these are all decisions that have already been made, and we are not going to reverse them. So we have to, we can't reverse the trail. The trail is going in. We've spent too much money and too much
and you're gonna
effort.
spend how much more?
We have it in our budget. We've gotten grants. We've done.
There is such a thing as putting good money after bad. And
Okay. Well, thank you for your comments.
Thank you.
Joe Curlin from 1528 Bryan Drive, Westchester. You know, there are a couple things here. When you started out with the trail, nothing was mentioned about the building of these other buildings. It was the trail was going to be separate, and then you had a meeting on that. What is the purpose of this? The trail started out at $3 million. Then it's up to $6 million. And there's also, if you review it, did you do a cost-benefit analysis of what it would cost in the future? And by delaying this, it's going to cost more. Okay? We're already running a budget deficit in 5 of the 7 here that was put out by this gentleman over here last month. We're running a deficit. Okay? Chester County is running a deficit. So, if you look at that in the future, costs will go up. You have to pay for costs. Have you put it out to the public to ask them how they're going to pay for this? Now, how do you pay for something? Let me ask you, you're an accountant, right? How do you pay for something?
Well, I'm not, are you asking how we're paying for the trail?
No, how do you pay for something as far as if you want to do any project?
That's sort of the general question, so I'm not exactly sure how to.
Okay,
answer
so
the
it's
question.
either revenue,
Right,
grants,
right.
or taxes.
Well, revenue and taxes are the same thing. I think maybe you're trying to say, like debt, like issuing bonds, is that?
Yeah, go debt,
Okay.
either. What happens is if you issue debt, you have to pay that back, number
Right.
one.
Mhm.
Number two, if you don't get grants, which the state of Pennsylvania is cutting back grants.
Sure.
Because they have problems now.
Right,
The third thing is you have to raise taxes,
right, okay.
okay? Chester County is going to have to raise taxes because they're running a deficit, okay? Their pensions, 10 years ago, I stood up at a meeting, I said, you gotta do something about this pension. You gotta look out into the future. I think, the taxpayer has a right to question some of
No, I
these
think
things.
those are good points. I would draw your attention to it's the last week in May traditionally. We do what's called a long-range planning session in which I model out 10 years and look at the forecast for expenditures and revenues. So we have, based on that, and we have financial policies that dictate what our required minimum fund balance is. And so we basically model out when, possible tax increases would be needed. And in the last time we did that, it was, I think, May 25th. And I'm happy to send you, it's on our website, but I'm happy to send it to you independently. We were looking at a tax increase in a 9-year time horizon. So that was 9 years from 2018. So that was 2027, 2028. In answer, I think there's a broader question you're asking about the cost of the trail. And so 2.5 years ago, we issued general obligation debt. We issued it for a number of projects. We issued it for the Milltown Dam. We issued it for Hershey Mill Dam, which we're required to do by per DEP. We issued debt on the sewer side, which is secured by sewer fees, to pay for our portion of improvements that are required by DEP at the West Goshen sewer plant, because about 2/3 of our sewer flows there. And then we issued a little bit for the playground improvements, which are now finished. And finally, we issued debt for the soft costs involved in the Paoli Pike Trail. So all total, those soft costs, when I say soft costs, I mean engineering, right-of-way acquisition, inspections, those kinds of things. It was $3 million. So embedded in that $8.1 million borrow was $3 million. The board was very clear at that time and has been consistently throughout this that we're not going to use taxpayer dollars to pay for construction costs. So our soft costs are pretty much stable. We still have, and it'll be in the budget proposal later, but those bonds, Trish, as I said, 2.5 years ago, still have adequate proceeds to pay for the remaining soft costs involved. But we've gotten, as I can't remember if it was you or a previous speaker made out, we have received $3.6 million in grants, and those are being used towards the hard costs. And we're continuing to apply for further grants for, particularly, there's one section that's a little tricky that basically goes from Reservoir Road to Ellis Lane, which is the sticky wicket. But Jason, Mark, our gangbuster team of grant writers are working hard to secure funding for that. The bottom line is, and I think your concerns are very valid, and I think I've heard them repeated various times, but we have the money for the township costs, and those are embedded into the forecasting that we do every May. So I'm
That's
happy
great.
to send you
That's
that.
great. But why not put money into infrastructure? Because infrastructure is more important to people getting to work every day. Now, if you look at that, where you're going to put this place, the congestion is going to be horrible. It's right across from the high school, if I understand, right down from the high school, right? The congestion is going to be absolutely horrible.
What congestion?
Just be clear, when you mean the trail? Is that
No,
what-
not the trail, the building around the trail, whatever you're building there.
That's not there. It's between
Right here.
352 and Boot Road.
Next door to
It's
this.
right on this one
Everybody
little
trying to get
small
the sewer
section.
Over here.
Yeah,
That's
Right
the
here.
parameter, that's the identified boundary for the Goshenville Town Center.
Yeah.
Well, that's even worse.
But that is that
That's
small
even worse, because if you look at do you drive every morning to see where traffic goes?
Most of this area is already,
Wait a minute. I've been living here 19 years, and when I came out here, I saw maybe 4 or 5 cars. Now, if you look at the traffic, this is a throughway to get to the other side of Chester County. You can't be sane to think that there isn't going to be congestion down here.
In the meeting that we had, the public meeting where people got to provide input, after we decided that only dwellings above a 1-story, we eliminated apartment buildings, everyone understand that. So that's gone. So the only thing you can do is build dwelling apartment units above a first floor commercial building. So we then looked at all of the buildings between Paoli Pike and Boot Road, and then looked at the 10-unit density per acre, and the maximum number of dwellings you're going to get in that area is 70. All right, that's 70. Now, let me ask you a question. How many units do you think exist at New Kent Apartments?
Where? New Kent? Well, I wouldn't have built that in the first place the way it is.
Well, it's there, so.
Yeah,
Okay, let me answer
that's
my
not the
question.
issue.
No, let me
The
answer the
issue is,
question.
that's not relevant.
Density and you're talking about traffic, so
Well,
let me finish.
that's not relevant.
Let me finish.
Yeah.
370 units.
Yeah.
So how much traffic do you put up with at the New Kent Triangle?
And you want more?
So 70 units, domestic, the dwelling units above retail
See-
is not gonna cause congestion.
You're missing the whole point of it, okay? The whole point is, if you got a thoroughfare and people have to get out to work, I can't even get out of Pin Oaks to go to work, okay? Because the traffic is so heavy. You're gonna put another place, go down in Newtown Square, where they built down in Newtown Square in the building now. That is going to be a nightmare by the time they finish it. Right down in Newtown Square, where they built all those townhouses, and they built on the other side. I don't know who did the cost benefit analysis of this, number one. Number two, I don't know where you even look at the density of the population is growing so quickly in this area. It's going to get worse.
We are not Newtown Square, and
I'm-
thank you for your comments.
Well, wait a minute, wait, you said it was your vision 40 years. Well, maybe these people have a different vision. Maybe we need to have a new vision and move forward to get some roads fixed around here. It took us 15 years, and I appreciate it, Rick, that you took care of the geese, but it took me 15 years to get those geese along. And it took one fence, and I gave you the plan in 2007. So finally, those dogs standing out there don't do any good. You have to have real dogs, okay? No, and I empathize with those people crossing the big pond, because now they have all our geese. And you have to understand, people have to live every day. They don't care. You don't even know what 3 years that bank building was open before they got Dunkin' Donuts in there. So you don't even know what businesses are going in there, right?
That's true.
Do you have leases signed ahead of time?
Absolutely not.
Well, that's what I would do. I would sign leases ahead of time. If you want to come in here,
From whom? I mean, a building owner has a right to.
well, wait a minute, you can drive the business. Wait a minute, you can tell the business owner pretty much this is the type of businesses we want to have in here.
Well, we do. We have a zoning ordinance which lists the different types of commercial units that we do permit in that area. So yes, we do. We have that in our zoning, but we can't tell a specific landowner that they have to put a specific store on their property.
And has this landowner done these projects before?
What landowner?
The people that are doing it.
We don't, there's nothing planned.
We do not,
The
we have
zoning
not,
ordinance, just as the comprehensive plan is a roadmap and a guide for the future land use planning in the municipality, the zoning ordinance is a more regulatory land use set of controls.
So you're not that far yet.
It's a planning document that sets the parameters for free enterprise that can
I
be.
know about free energy. You're gonna tell me.
Well, I'm not telling you
There may-
anything, I'm trying to explain to you,
I find
sir.
it very offensive that every time you say something and these guys try to respond, that you cut them off.
Well, then you come up here and say something.
Well, I would like to hear the response to
Okay.
what you're asking, and you
Okay,
never give them
fine.
a chance to finish.
Okay, go ahead, sir.
Well, again, the zoning ordinance is a set of land use controls that provides the basis for the free market that we have here, commercial entrepreneurs, retailers, to make a determination under the parameters that we've set for our land use controls, whether or not there's a use that they would like to invest in meeting those land use controls and regulations, the design standards, et cetera. And they will make that determination whether they think it's a profitable venture or not to come into that area and operate one of the uses that are permitted under the zoning ordinance. But the zoning ordinance is a planning document. It is not a document that sets up a bidding process or a lease arrangement. It is merely a set of blueprints for land use planning that sets a stage for the market to make decisions of whether it wants to participate in our municipality under our conditions and our regulations.
Okay, so you approve that zoning ordinance here?
Oh, yes, that's on
Okay.
the local municipal level.
And that's approved now, or you're going to have it approved?
Well, this particular set of amendments that we're referring to with the traditional neighborhood development overlays is the process that we've gone through with public comment and responding to that. Tonight, the motion was to submit, as we're required under the municipalities planning code, Pennsylvania Municipalities Planning Code, to submit that to the county agency for review and comment. And at that point in time, they will respond with comments back to us, and we will set a hearing date for a public hearing to consider whether or not to adopt the ordinance or not. So there'll be another opportunity for public comment at that hearing. We're looking to probably schedule that later on in December, pending the receipt of comments from the County Planning Commission. So that's part of the process. But it was the action tonight was merely to continue the process. There was nothing adopted per se.
But you're going to present the budget before you have the zoning ordinance, the hearing on that.
Well, the
And
budget
just
is
let me, I'll just
Yeah.
say again, there's really nothing about the budget that is impacted by this. This is, as Mike said, this is a zoning ordinance, and it would just sort of dictate what Mark Gordon, the zoning officer, is basically allowed to permit or not permit. It's just a marching order. So it doesn't have any budget impact on the township, at least certainly not in the first year. So and tonight what we're going to do with the budget is just really present it. Again, under the second class township code, you need to present and advertise the proposed budget for 20 days before it can be adopted. So it'd be December 3rd is the earliest that it could be adopted. But as I said, this TND ordinance has no impact on any budget that may or may not be adopted in December.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Hi, Michelle True, 1430 Grandin Lane. Mark, I wanted to ask you, because something that has not been, pardon my back, something that hasn't been brought up at this point, with the commercial on the main floor, is there an option that stores could actually exercise, or restaurants, to make it a 2-story or 3-story commercial dwelling?
Commercial.
So,
2 or 3 story commercial use?
yes,
Yes, you can do that.
so that's also in the TMD.
Right, so whatever the TND, so currently the C2 zoning district, what we're talking about primarily in front of the building, to the left and right, across the street is a C5. All the uses today that are allowed in those districts will carry over to the TND
Okay.
1. With
Okay.
a couple of additions, apartments above commercial, pop-up use, artisan
Right.
shop,
Okay.
some very
Okay.
minor changes,
It's just something that I-
additions to
Okay,
these.
it's just something I kept forgetting to ask. So it could potentially be a 3-story commercial building if someone so chose to
Yes.
do that.
Yeah, you have a doctor's office,
And
something like that, sure.
Okay, so the professional
2
offices.
stories. Today they're now 2 stories. yes.
Today, 2 stories, but with the TND overlay as it is
40,
with this
40
new
foot
plan.
max.
you have a 40-foot max, which
Yeah, but
limits.
that's okay, but so it could still be 3 stories. It could be doctor's offices, it could be
3 stories.
artisan, a number of little artisan shops, that kind of thing, a coffee shop and so on. Okay. I'm curious to know, has this been vetted through other committees as well besides the planning commission and the board of supervisors?
Futures committee, one. Excuse me, I know the future, excuse me.
Our committee went around to all the ABCs
Oh,
and presented the plan.
Would you like to come up, go speak through the mic. so
Tom
people can-
Kilborn is a member of the township president, of course, and a member of the Futurist Committee. And will
As you
comment.
know,
Thank you,
Michelle
Tom.
attended one of our meetings, so we had a nice discussion. Yes, as part of the planning, and I've been involved a lot more than just in the Futures Committee. I've been involved in the committees that develop the comprehensive plan and the Paley Pike Master Plan, the Paley Pike Plan, and the Township Plan. And we've had a number of meetings. And I see a number of people here that seem to be against this kind of concept. I will tell you that there's at least as many people are in this audience participated in that planning process. There were lots of people involved, not just a few people up here, not just our planner. So, and it was presented time and time again, and we got a lot of feedback. And frankly, we got a lot of positive feedback about the Township Center. So I'm really kind of surprised to see all the negativity. Given that what the Township Center looks like right now, I think we could make some nice improvements to that. And I don't think we're talking about Exton, we're not talking about King of Prussia, we're talking about East Goshen. So if you look at some of the schematics that the people have put together as far as the design criteria and whatnot, it's clearly in line with our communities, which are beautiful, our park, which is beautiful. A lot of positive things have been done by these people up here for the township. So I don't quite understand why everybody's so negative about this, to be honest with you. They've done a terrific job. They did the Applebrook Park, they did the playground, they're doing the path, which, by the way, I have a daughter and a granddaughter in the area that live in the township. They think it's terrific. My granddaughter, I'm sorry?
Do they know how big it is?
Yeah, they do, yeah. And my granddaughter wants to know when she's gonna be able to drive ride her bike to Dunkin' Donuts or to high school. And so I told her, it's probably not gonna be while she's in high school. So anyway,
By the way, Michelle, as you come up, I just wanted to comment, Tom mentioned Applebrook Park. It's of note that, and it's reflected in the financial report this month, that the bond debt that was taken out to improve the Applebrook Park section of the East Goshen Park complex was paid off this month. So that $3 million debt has now been extinguished, and so that's another feather in the cap of the township for managing its finances and making great improvements at the same time. I just thought I'd comment, since Tom mentioned Applebrook Park.
Well, back to the fact, I still don't know which committees actually have vetted this. Has it actually officially gone to any committees? And Tom says that he took it around to some of the committees. I don't know which committees have seen
The
it.
planning commission is responsible for the preparation. They were the group that was tasked with developing this ordinance.
Right.
So the planning commission met and the task to develop the draft that was presented 2 weeks ago. And then in response to the comments that we had the last meeting, we took what staff had prepared and sent it back to the planning commission, and they are the ones that come back and suggest they'll be put in dwelling units above commercial.
Right, I understand that, but has this been vetted through other committees?
The
So
other
did the historical
committees-
committee see it?
No.
Did the pipeline safety
No.
task force see it?
No.
Did,
Unless they would have gone to the planning commission meeting, yes.
okay, so it hasn't been vetted through other committees. Is that a standard process when something like this
The
is supposed to
planning
happen?
commission is responsible for zoning and subdivision ordinances.
Okay, and that's what I wanted to know. Okay, and, so has this also been tossed to fire and police?
This is just a plan.
Okay,
There is nothing, if we got to the point where someone came in and said they wanted to develop a piece of property, then it would go through the Conservancy, it would go through all these various groups. But this is just a plan. It's just a piece of paper.
Could I just?
It's a zoning ordinance that's developed by the planning commission, and ultimately, the only ones who can approve a zoning ordinance change is the board of supervisors. They're the legislative body, they're the ones who make the rules, and that's their task. But they task the planning commission to develop this zoning overlay. The planning commission has done that. We've gone back and forth a number of times with comment, public input, and addressed those issues with the board and then back to the planning commission. So there's no need for the other groups to be involved because they're more operational. So when a development, a plan, like Janet was saying, comes in, everyone, the municipal authority, the Conservancy Board, the Historic Commission, if needed, all weigh in on development plans, but not until a development
Somebody
plan.
comes to you with
Correct.
And if I could, please, Michelle, on
Yeah.
fire and
Yes,
police, there's nothing to look at right now because it's a piece of paper. Let's say Michelle Truitt comes in to build a building.
I'm building a building.
Zoning, land development, Mark Gordon, codes department will have everything in NFPA 53, everything for safety standards. We run through the fire chief. If it seems to be a problem with parking lots for the ladder truck and apparatus, there is nothing to protect right now other than what is there.
Okay,
So it's a vision, just like
so it's
my
something-
budget at home, which is a real vision.
so it's a
But it's
vision,
something that's a work
work in progress.
in progress until something happens. Everybody gets triggered. Conservancy,
Okay,
trees, fire
that's
protection.
that's what I wanted to know. Thank you.
Once something is requested
Okay,
for development.
thank you. That's pretty much all I wanted to say and ask about. I wanted to make sure some of those issues were cleared up, and thank you for clearing up the potential three-story commercial use.
Thank you.
And Michelle, congratulations on your election victory.
Hi, Linda Polishuk, 1424 Grand Oak. I just have a few comments. I'm sorry, I've been here 45 years. I know I'm old. I don't recall any talk of a town center. I feel like I keep up with the constant contact. I read the newsletters. I feel like I'm sort of on board. The last I processed any of this was when there was talk of extending the trail. And then the town center, my concept was just there at 352, that little thing. And all of a sudden, where have I been? But I'm sorry, it's now exploded into going all along any up to Reservoir Road, where
No,
any
the-
property can be redeveloped.
No,
The farm goes up there.
The T&D goes from T&D 1, which is a commercial, goes from Boot Road to Dorchester Road,
which is 350.
52. Okay,
That's it.
That's the T&D 1.
Well, what,
The T&D 2, which allows for the single-family detached and semi-detached, includes the Perano property, which is between Reservoir Road and the Triangle sign. It also includes, and includes the Caracas property and the Goshen Prince property.
well, why was there such a to-do about the, Hankin?
Hankin submitted a request for rezoning in the business park district to allow for apartments.
Has nothing to do with this
That was a
T&D.
different project.
Totally different.
Different project.
But there was reference to the Chester County landscapes, right, at that time?
They made reference to a number of projects when they commented on that review, yes.
In other words, my point is, I just feel like you guys have not done that great a job in communicating to the community how different this is all gonna be, that you have accepted totally the landscape concept and
Our comprehensive plan is consistent with what's in landscape.
that's what I mean.
Right,
That
it's
should be
consistent.
broadcast better. I mean, just saying, we had meetings and people are not being communicated with. And I feel like I'm up on stuff.
Thank you.
Good evening, Frank Morgan, 1704 Clock Tower Drive. My question is, with regard to the buildings in the town center, are they going to be owned by the developer, or are they going to be owned by the shop owners?
The developer, the property owner,
Okay,
Property.
the property owner.
the
So
property.
the property owners then be the
Township
one.
doesn't regulate ownership, so they could be all leases through a landlord that leases the space, just like any commercial.
So the apartments then would also be under the control of the landlord?
Correct.
Then there's no need to have apartments. Let them rent out to the shops, and that's fine. Don't need any residential in there. Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Morgan.
Leo Sinclair, Lockwood Lane. My question regarding commercial properties. Do we currently in our township have occupancy levels limits? for buildings.
What do you mean by limits?
Well, there's a fire code.
Of course.
Like in this room, we only let have 100 people.
Yes.
Okay. For the commercial, well, okay, I'm gonna do a comparison basically. I want to compare apartments with commercial. We have, I think you said, you knocked the number down to 10 units, is that correct?
10 units per acre,
Per acre, yes.
maximum.
So 10 acre multiplied by 3.5, I think whatever the magic number is for a family. That's, let's say 30 people per property. Just give or take. What I'm getting at is this, for the occupancy level, if instead of putting apartments in there, put a business in there, so for instance, I run an IT business. I have my consultants come in every day. My limit to how many people I have in that building.
So parking will be would be determined on the size of the building, yes.
Okay, so that's the parking aspect. I'm trying to wrap my head around. If I have apartments in there, I'll have 30 people in there. If I run a commercial business, will I have more people in there? When people are talking about traffic flow, okay, so I'm trying to wrap my head around the fact is, I know this is not funny, I'm actually gonna say this. Would I rather have apartments or would I rather have commercial? I wanna know what the numbers are in comparison.
There are two parameters within apartments or residential dwellings. There are regulations on the number of unrelated parties that can live within a residential
Right,
dwelling, a unit.
Yeah.
Whereas commercial properties, retail, restaurants, retail establishments have set by fire code and others, occupancy limits, maximum occupancy.
Right.
They're really two different parameters.
Right, but the two parameters are very telling. Okay, for
But-
instance, if I have a house, I have 2 kids in my house, and they're under the age of driving, they're not driving, I have 2 cars in my driveway. If I own a business, I've got 17 guys working for me, that's potentially 17 cars.
Leo,
That's
It-
the
it-
reason for zoning.
Right,
Well,
so
and I-
here's what I'm getting to, please, let me finish. What I'm saying is, let's just say for the fact of zoning, you only limit me to 12 cars in my back parking lot. I've got 17 guys working, guess what they're gonna do? They're either park the car on that street, they're gonna park the car in someone else's business, or potentially down the road, whatever. And I'm trying to wrap my head around, are we looking at a problem with apartments? Are we gonna look at problems with commerce? Because either way, we're gonna have cars. And I'm trying to balance out the car load here, because everybody is concerned about traffic. So, I mean, I know a lot of people are saying, let's not have apartments. And honestly, I don't want apartments either, but I also want an analysis of whether or not will we have more cars with more commerce or more cars with residents.
Leo, when someone decides to develop a piece of property, and remember, these are very small parcels. We're not looking at 100 acres or anything. They're maybe 1 acre, 2 acre parcels. When someone comes in with a plan, parking is a big consideration. And the ordinance the changes that we're adopting here not only have requirements for the commercial piece, they also have requirements for whatever living arrangements are above it. So that small piece of property would have to have enough parking to handle whatever is required for that use. And if there is not sufficient parking, then they are not going to be able to maximize apartments over the.
Excuse me, I'm sorry, you missed my point. I've been in the IT business now for over 20 years, and I've worked in all kinds of companies. I worked at one point in a consulting firm that had roughly maybe 50 guys working there. Now here's the catch. Majority of the time we were out at client sites, but there were times we had to come into meetings. There were times where we were, quote, on the bench. And we were in a small little building, and hell, they crammed us in there. And guess what? We didn't have parking, so we parked in the business next door to us. We parked down the street and walked over to the office. So it comes back to the same question again. If I have an apartment building, I can pretty much guess that I'm gonna have a family of 3.5 people. But with a business, a commerce business like an IT business, that'll be 2-3 stories high, you're gonna cram guys in there. Now I've got a problem. As a resident, I'm like, hell, there's a lot more cars on my roadway. So I wanna know is, simply put, what is the occupancy level for a business, a common village business?
Under the proposed ordinance, you would need 4 parking spaces per 1,000 square feet.
So I can get a carpool going.
Oh, if you're gonna come in and operate a business, and you tell us that you're gonna have 8 employees, then or your building is gonna be 2,000 square feet, and you need to provide parking spaces for 8 employees.
Again, I don't care about parking right now. I know it should, yes, and that's what my argument is, but I'm now concerned about what is the fire limit? What is the limit of amount of people being?
So it all depends on the type of use. So
Thank you.
if it's office use, it has a certain threshold, right? So it's
That's what we
occupancy
have
level.
now.
Yes.
Yes,
That doesn't change.
now.
Of course.
Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thanks, Leo.
Okay, this will be our last comment because we have to move on.
Rick Ann Stewart, 405 Schofield Lane in Westchester. My first question is, how many property owners are there in the TND1 district?
We have still the slides from,
About 20, 25.
Individuals or corporations?
Well, the property owners, some people own more than one lot, some parcels, the CVS is made up a couple parcels, so. And then, of course, you got the executive center, which is condos, so I don't know how you want to count condos.
So if there's 20 property owners, once this thing gets approved, we can have 20 different visions of what the buildings are gonna look like?
We already
You can do
do.
that, yes.
We already do.
Well, that brings me to my next question. Is there an architectural illustration
Yes.
existing anywhere where we can go take a look at what this thing's likely to look like?
There are some suggested guidelines that they're trying to bring about in buildings, not, in other words, they don't want a row of strip stores, they're trying to get variations in the front facades of the building.
So that planning document that John showed up on our website has the general design standards guidelines that shows kind of the design standards that the plan or the zoning ordinance is trying to get to.
The illustrations are on the website?
Yes, there's some examples, not illustrations. There's examples of different types of building styles and design features, yes.
So with respect with the traditional neighborhood development number 2, how many property owners are there?
In 2, there is 6,
And how many acres is that roughly?
10, 18, maybe 20 acres.
And that's zoned for either townhouses or single family?
No,
Zoned for single family detached and single family.
no townhouses.
Oh, single family.
Semi-attached, semi-detached dwellings, which is twins. Single,
Twins and singles?
singles, yep.
On 18 acres. All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, any other comments from the board?
No.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, now we need to come up with a date for a hearing. Do we have any suggestions? When will we get comments back from the county?
You won't make the first meeting in December, you can do it the second meeting in December.
All right, why don't we schedule it for the second meeting in December, which is 17th.
But they've already seen the plan, Marty, so
Yeah,
they're done.
No, they've seen.
We can do it the first week, sure.
They both have to see the final version.
We'll have the county comments,
Everybody's comments by.
All right. We will schedule, a hearing then on the December 17th. That works?
Yes, that allows adequate time for advertising, yes.
Okay.
Question, is there some reason you couldn't hold it in January after Christmas stuff?
There are a couple of properties currently that are vacant or not being used, and we would like to get this done before a developer comes in to possibly make a change.
It would only be several weeks.
Well, we're doing it, we've scheduled it for the 17th. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, moving on.
Yeah. The other thing is, you said you didn't have a developer, now you got properties you want to sell.
We don't want,
The M&T Bank is for sale next door, and the CV, and it's not CVS, the Swiss Farm is still vacant. So they're the properties that are still out there on the market.
Okay.
They have been giving some indications of interest in this area.
Okay, this topic is complete. We have to move on. We're going to consider recommendations for a not to exceed construction services proposal for Paoli Pike Trail segments C, D, and E.
I guess it was at the last meeting, you requested that, we go back to the engineering firm and get a not to exceed proposal, and we have got that.
Is there a motion?
Yeah, Madam Chair, I'll move that we accept the October 17th, 2019 proposal from McMahon Associates for the construction services of segments C, D, and E of the Paoli Pike Trail in the amount of $93,600 and authorize the chairman to sign the proposal.
I'll second that, and with the motion, I want to thank Rick and staff for going back and pursuing a firm price from a consultant. Thank you. Second.
Any discussion? Any comments from the floor? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? It's approved. Well, I know. All right. Next, we will look at the 2020 budget. John?
All right. So thank you, everybody, for coming out to talk about the 2020 proposed budget. Just some, background. I addressed it earlier, but this is what
As John is preparing to give the presentation, I wanted to offer a couple ad hoc comments on the budget presentation, the package that's been put together by John Alshaw and under the guidance of Rick Smith. The presentation, and I have to be director of finance in East Bradford Township, former manager there. I know a little bit about finance and budgets and municipal operations. This is really second to none of any municipalities and presentations of budgets packaged in Chester County. John has been a mentor to me. His integrity, his knowledge, and his dedication to the job that he's doing in public service is non-parallel in my opinion. So as we get started, John, I just wanted to put that out and thank you. It's much appreciated. Very well done.
So thank you very much, Mike. Those are kind words. So what I'm going to do is go through this main PowerPoint presentation. All of this information is on the website. If you go to, I'll just show you real quick. If you go to if you go to services and then finance, and then there is a budget tab, annual budget. All the materials are posted here. I actually have to, I realized I didn't post the police budget, but I'll do that tomorrow morning. So we're back to where I was. I'm just gonna, for whatever reason it keeps closing on me, so I'm just gonna go to this. Okay, so I'm not going to read every single line here, but please, if you have questions from the board as well as the public, this is a good time to make your thoughts known. Under the second class township code, as I mentioned before, the budget has to be advertised for at least 20 days before it can be adopted. So the earliest it could be adopted would be December 3rd. Okay, so there is a copy of all these budget materials is online. There's also a hard packet in the front desk if you like to look at it. I'm going to run through these PowerPoint slides, not read everything, but highlight the main things. First, for the 17th consecutive year, no tax increases are proposed in this budget. There's no need to raise taxes. We're fine there. The budget does have a structural deficit of about $459,000 and change, and this is reflected in the budget as a revenue as a transfer from fund balance. So all total, we have about $8 million in fund balance. So that deficit represents about 6% total. Now, in the past, we have historically adopted budgets with deficits. Fortunately, we have avoided actually ending a year in a deficit position, certainly as long as I've been here, and I think for many years before that, and that's because of a number of things. We budget conservatively for things like snow removal and stormwater maintenance, as well as on the revenue side, we typically under budget, particularly for transfer tax. Anytime a large commercial property sells, a Wellington and Bellingham, those kinds of properties, is a windfall of tax revenue, which obviates the need to actually draw money from that fund balance. I think the big thing, though, that I do want to draw people's attention to, the board's attention to, is I think it is time. My recommendation is that in 2020, we raise the refuse and recycling rate from the current level of $69.88, which has been unchanged since 2011, to $75 per quarter. Now, I'm going to talk more about that when I get to the refuse fund section, but that is kind of an important piece of the revenues equation. So, just some key assumptions. I'm using inflation of 1.6%, which is what the 2020 Social Security increase will be. Health insurance premiums are up 7.06%. We do have an accumulated credit from our health insurance provider, and we're sitting on that. I'm recommending we sit on that for one more year when it reaches its maximum amount, so that in 2021, we could be in a situation where health insurance premiums don't increase because we'll be able to draw down on that accumulated credit that we've stored up over the last 3 years. Another thing that's important is, as you might remember from 2013, when we adopted had adopted financial policies, we developed a kind of unique way of calculating depreciation. At this point, I think it's prudent for the township to go back to the original accumulated depreciation method, and that's basically the amount of money we transfer from the general fund to the capital reserve fund or the sinking fund in order to pay for vehicle replacements, a new roof, things like that, so that we don't have to take on additional debt. But by going to that pre-2013 method of calculating depreciation, it will increase overall our transfer by about $80,000. But I do think it's a good time to do that so that we always have enough money in that capital reserve fund. Next slide just shows some assumptions about revenue. Again, we try to stay conservative here. This year, we've seen EIT sort of continue to flatten out, and so my 2019 year-end projection is very conservative for EIT. So the forecasters are projecting 3.5% for income growth in 2020. So, and I'm only going with 1.6%. So we'll be fine there. And across the board, we're seeing some slight reassessments upward on the real estate side, but really nothing out of the ordinary. One thing I do want to bring to people's attention is we have started to have meetings at Chester County Consortium Group about renewing our franchise agreements with Comcast and Verizon. It's something to keep an eye out for. Comcast and Verizon particularly Verizon are taking an aggressive approach, and that is one area of concern I have, maybe not next year, but over the next 5 to 10 years. And we are going to propose a handful of small permit fee increases to reflect the ongoing increases in the costs of providing permit services, but these are just for things like decks, marked decks, the other ones, swimming pools, and these are modest 5 or 10% increases. We haven't increased these things in at least 10 years, and just keeping up with the additional costs of providing those services. Okay, on the police side, let me close this here. So our police represents a little less than 50% net out revenue, about 50% of our overall budget. One of the things that some of you might be aware of is that we're currently undergoing an what's called Act 111 binding arbitration with our the police union. And so right now a panel of arbitrators are deciding essentially the contours of that labor agreement with the police for the next 3 to 4 years. So we're still sort of waiting on that. So there is a bit of an unknown how that's going to play out. But the key things here, we're going to continue to fund the pension at 110% of the MMO to reduce that unfunded liability for the police pension plan. And again, for I think the third consecutive year, we're going to draw money out of the East Goshen's police pension. Well, I'm recommending that we draw 25% of that liability. This is something like $180,000 from that separate East Goshen Police Pension Trust, using that to address the overall unfunded liability in the police pension trust within the next 9 years. I think we'll have that issue completely resolved, and we can retire that trust entirely. And then for the second consecutive year, we would fund the cost of retired officers' health insurance out of the WeGo Police Department Other Post-Employment Benefit, or OPEB trust. So those costs are about $120,000 for those retired officers' medical, but then we contribute another $99,000 to continue the upward trajectory there. We are, as you may not know, East Goshen and Westtown collectively have one of the highest funded other post-employment benefit trusts in the Commonwealth and quite possibly the country. So we're in a very enviable position there. On the fire side, the one thing I want to draw your attention to is, Good Fellowship asked for about $24,000 this year for the first time. Good Fellowship provides advanced life support to about half of the township. Malvern Fire Company provides advanced life support to the other half of the township. So what we would, in the interest of being equitable, this budget proposed basically funding Good Fellowship at the same level as Malvern, which is a little less than $14,000. On the public works side, there's nothing major for stormwater. I think one of the big things Mark wants to do in 2020 is use the new sewer camera in order to do a sort of census of the condition of our storm sewer pipes. Just if you don't know, about 6 months ago, we purchased a new sewer camera, basically this kind of cool little rover with a camera in it that goes through both sanitary and stormwater sewer lines to find leaks and infiltration and inflow. So Mark's gonna work on that, but I don't think we have any major on the stormwater side. I think they were way too conservative, and I think when we get the money in March, we'll be pleasantly surprised, but I have to budget based on what PennDOT tells us. Mark is concerned about emerald ash borer. It's an invasive species that's eating away at ash trees. And so there's a request for 50. That's one of the reasons that it appears on paper that public works budget is going up by a lot, is because the way that we have of depreciation is going to impact the public works budget more than other funds budgets. And that's just because basically any public works, like any trucks that we purchased between 2010 and 2013, we weren't properly appreciating them for the last 6 years. Now we are going to. The bottom line, though, is we still have excess money in that capital reserve fund, so it's not a huge thing. The snow forecasts, I think a couple months ago they were saying active winter season. Now it seems to be very wet season, but not necessarily a cold season. This is Farmer's Almanac, just throwing darts at blindfolded and a little drunk. So basically, just keeping it's. The proposed budget is increased from the year-end projection in 2019, but essentially the same level as the 2019 adopted budget. And on the refuse side, continue the status quo with the roadside litter, hazardous e-waste events, the 2 e-recycling events. We actually had I was in the park on Saturday, and it looks like there was good turnout for that e-recycling event. On the administration side, we budgeted $31,000 this year to install a radio booster in the township building. This is part of an ordinance that was passed last year to basically make sure that there's radio communication in all commercial properties. As we saw with the Bellingham incident from a year ago, There was, the emergency responders had difficulty communicating with command when they were in the basement of Bellingham when that terrible event unfolded a year ago. And so in order for us to comply with our own ordinance, we budgeted for this year $31,000 to install this radio booster. However, we didn't have time, so it's just sort of deferring that to 2020. Another thing that many in the audience might not be aware of, but it's just good to get on your radar because you're probably going to hear more about it. East Goshen, along with Westchester Advisory and Information Sharing Group, hired a consulting firm called Cadmus to evaluate clean energy investments in the Westchester area to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions over the next 10 to 35 years. There will be some recommendations in there, and there'll be some sort of further legwork. So this budget isn't recommending we actually make any investments in 2020, solar panels, or EV charging stations, but those are something to look at moving forward. And trying to do that in a cost-neutral way as much as possible. The solar panels will eventually pay for themselves. An EV charging station could have a card reader on it so that we get revenue to offset the cost of implementation. Park and Rec, there's really the big thing there, and I want to draw your attention to, is we have to finish the planting at Marydale next year. And then Nate Klein, our engineer, has finished up his sort of preliminary work for the rehabilitation of the Bow Tree 1 pond, which is badly silted up at this point. And a lot of it involves stream restoration upstream from the pond. And actually, sort of as a side note to this, Nate is available to come in and sort of have a meeting, a public meeting, but specifically invite residents of Bow Tree to talk about what that plan would look like and how residents could be involved. I don't know, we could do it like end of the year, we could wait until early 2020. It doesn't really matter too much, but I'd like to sort of get the word out sooner rather than later if you guys have any guidance there.
Yeah, get them involved, and it's good.
And then there's really nothing, the only big thing with codes, again, it looks like there's a big increase, but that's just because it reflects concern, well, the year-end project, well, it's on paper. There's not really anything big proposed for codes. The only thing is I talked about those increases for permits for decks and swimming pools, signs, working without a permit, ticky-tack things at the margin. The ABC budget requests are what they are. We had some back and forth with the Sustainability Advisory Committee, but I think we've got them in a good place, keeping their budget under control. They're really otherwise really nothing out of ordinary in the ABC budget requests. This shows essentially the summary of the general fund by operating department, and basically shows that if you take away the operating reserve fund, which has about $2.6 million in it, we are projected to finish 2020 with a general fund balance of about $5 million. As I said, you throw in the operating reserve fund, and that gets more into the $7.6 million range. Again, keeping our AAA rating with very good fund balance to annual revenue coverage. So these slides just show where the money's coming from. It really highlights how important earned income tax is to the overall health of the general fund in the township. And this shows 2019 year-end projections compared to 2020 on the revenue side. Nothing too out of the ordinary. Real estate transfer tax was high this year because Waterview Apartments sold at the very beginning of the year. And this shows where the money goes, and it shows that really 50% of it's going to emergency service, which was primarily the police, 20% to public works, and then down through the line. And this basically shows just comparison, a bar chart comparison of those expenses as well. Now I want to run through the state of the other funds. We have 7 or 8 other funds. They're important to draw people's attention. State liquid fuel I alluded to earlier. This is money that we get from gasoline tax. And is used to offset basically zeroed out at the end of the year and reimburses the general fund for a small portion ultimately of our paving, plowing, stormwater work, signal work as well. And PennDOT's estimates were a little lower than I expected, and I'm almost positive they'll be higher in 2019. Just PennDOT playing games. The capital reserve funds, this is the one I was talking about changing, going back to that pre-2013 depreciation schedule. So as a result, there'd be a larger transfer from general fund. But this is what's kind of key about the capital reserve fund and for all these projects that we've received grants for. So that includes construction costs for the trail. That includes the parking, the land improvements above both Milltown, Hershey's, and Old Band. Because we're getting grants there, we're not allowed to commingle grants per IRS guidelines. We're not allowed to commingle grants with bond proceeds. So all of those costs, those construction costs, will really be paid for on the front end by the capital reserve fund. And to the extent that there's money that isn't reimbursing the capital reserve fund is made whole, the bond fund will swoop in and reimburse the capital reserve fund. So this year's in particular looks kind of out of whack, but it's just because the construction costs for those big projects are really being borne by the capital reserve fund. These are the replacement assets, primarily, I mean, the PC replacements we always do, but then all of the public works stuff. The two sort of big ticket things are basically 3 new dump trucks, one of which we'll talk about later tonight. But those are at the end of their useful life, and we have the money in the capital reserve fund to replace them without incurring any debt. So these are the proposed new assets, and the big ones. This is the radio booster. You know, that's a new thing. The trench shoring struts we've had them. Basically, whenever you dig a trench, you need these struts in order to maintain the integrity of the trench. They don't collapse, and there's not a catastrophic accident. Basically, we've had these struts forever. However, we haven't been appreciating them, so therefore we're treating, even though they're technically a replacement, we'll treat them financially as a new asset. And then, you know, the big ticket items are obviously those land improvements for the dams and the construction of the trail, but those are going to be offset by the grants. So they, you know, it's just a wash there. And this slide just reiterates what I said. You know, even though we borrowed money for the grants, we have to pay for it out of the capital reserve. Transportation fund, just a couple things to bring to your attention. We wanted to do this in 2019, but it looks like it's going to have to get deferred to 2020, is restriping the Hoot Road to add a northwest bound lane from Wilson to Green Hill, so that traffic coming out of the QVC and that whole corridor, Mars Drinks corridor, or now it's called the La Baza, you know, and if you take that road between about 4 o'clock and 5:30, you know, it just backs up. Basically, without increasing the cartway, without increasing the current width of the cartway, we can add a northwest bound lane, still leave the folks in West Goshen who live along there enough space to park their car, put their toters out by the side of the road, and it will help, you know, just move traffic. I mean, that's a project we would split 50-50 with West Goshen. Another thing is some very modest temporary improvements to King Road and Route 352. This is that project that you may have heard about, East Whiteland Township. This is an extraordinarily modified version of that, and just very small improvements. Nothing like the taking of land or anything like that you may have heard about, you know, back in the early summer. This would just be superficial things to improve flow. Sewer operating funds, you know, there is overall a 4.5% increase here that's proposed. Some of this is just for necessary capital improvements, keeping up with the municipal authority. They do a very good, very careful job making sure we're doing the maintenance capital work that we need to make sure that we don't face much larger costs in the future. One of the big things we do is relining old concrete, so basically pre-1975 sewer lines are starting at end of the useful life. So we're basically just spraying rubber, essential plastic in them so that they can continue to be used for indefinitely. And similarly, a lot of those pre-1975 manholes are lined with bricks. Basically, we spray those manholes and seal them so that methane gas doesn't sort of seep through and cause further problems. So really what you're seeing here is just sort of maintenance capital bumping up those sewer fund costs. One of the things, well, I'll talk about that when we get to the sewer capital fund. Now, the refuse fund, this is the thing I alluded to earlier, proposing a $5.12 per quarter increase. So that we get to $75 per quarter. The reason that I'm recommending this increase is whereas 3 or 4 years ago, when China was still accepting recyclables, we would get money back from the recycling processor for a share of the sales of those recycled materials. Now we're seeing with China closing its borders to US recycling, it's harder for the processor to find markets. We're being charged now roughly $34 per ton for our recyclables. So there's more and more pressure on the refuse fund. And I do think it's important we raise rates, get out ahead of the problem, raise those rates now so that we can, that fund will continue to have a healthy fund balance. If you look at this page, it shows what would basically happen with a $5 per quarter rate increase and a $10 per quarter rate increase. And you see that probably at $75 per quarter, we'll still run into some financial difficulties if the trends with recycling stay as they are now, but at least buys us some time. If we don't raise the rates, we'll really be out of money by 2022 or so. This gives us at least 2024. I would point out that even with a rate increase, we'd still be less than our neighbors to the west and the south, and still providing, I think, really quality refuse and recycling services. So, you know.
I would also note, since I work there at East Bradford, that at 6490, we only collect refuse recycle one time a week. Okay. You have the benefit in East Goshen the twice a week pickup, which I don't necessarily agree with, but
There you go, you've got great service.
Yeah. That save us money?
Can you, if you're gonna make a comment, can you come up and say?
Or can we
Or hold until the end,
questions
but that was
until
my,
we
but I wanna hear your comment, I just wanna give it the proper shrift, okay? So the bond fund, we alluded to this before, 2.5 years ago, we issued $8.1 million, some of it for improvements to West Goshen's sewer infrastructure, some of it for the Paley Pike Trail, for the soft costs of the trail, some of it for the breaching of the 2 dams, and some of it for the playground, which is already done. So this year, basically, the bond fund proposal shows us essentially drawing down all of the general fund costs that we anticipate at this time. And that would leave us, and this key number to look at is general fund share at the end of 2020 proposed $570,000. So basically, we're looking at a cushion of about $570,000, plus or minus, but hopefully 500 times. We have egg on my face in a year. I know it's not going to work out to $570,000. So full disclosure, I'm not betting my 401k on this, but so right now we are on target to have enough money to pay for the soft costs of the trail out of the bond fund. And if you look at this is a very busy slide, but again, the cell in the lower right-hand side under surplus and deficit shows on the general fund side, we'll have that $570,000. But I really do caution the board, we want to kind of protect that to the extent that there's overruns on the construction costs. We still have that money available in the bond funds to address those. One of the things I'll also draw your attention to, and this is more of, I just want to plant seed overruns for 2 projects in West Goshen. One of which is what they call the WWTP wastewater treatment plant phase 2 improvements to address phosphorus levels. Big thing the DEP regulates in this part of America is level of phosphorus in our wastewater, and they are required by DEP to bring down their phosphorus levels quite a bit. Because of a handful of little, collectively that add up to a lot of money, there's some overruns for that project. And then we've just been made aware of the West Town Way pump station, which is technically in West Goshen, but 55% of the flow, the sewage flow that goes through West Town Way pump station comes from East Goshen, so we're responsible for those improvements. That project, because of some structural problems, basically underground, is going to come in over budget. So there is the potential on the sewer fund side that we will not have enough money. Now, this is something that the municipal authority and the staff are going to be talking about, and then going back and forth with West Goshen about over the next year, and hopefully troubleshoot some issues. But it is something that we may have to consider, for example, borrowing money from the sewer capital reserve, which has about $2.3 million in it, to offset those overruns, and then essentially basically create a no interest loan and pay ourselves back. So there's sufficient level of funding in that sewer capital reserve. So a lot more to go. I did want to get that on your radar. That's something that started giving me heartburn very recently. Municipal authority is technically a separate legal entity, and the township isn't responsible for adopting this budget, but it's paid for essentially with all the capital improvements are paid for with sewer fees. If you look at this page, it shows the projects. Some of them are just deferrals from 2019. It's just we're not going to get finished, and some of them are new projects. I think the big new one is this caustic soda project. So right now, if you look at our plant, we have the SBR tanks for sequence batch reactor tanks. And right now we have the public works guys basically hauling these 50 pounds of caustic soda bags over their shoulder in the middle of winter on these 20 feet of aluminum steps. And then they manually pour the caustic soda in. Not only is it very dangerous for worker safety, but it is inefficient because we're not sort of maximizing when we should be adding the caustic soda into the toxic stew, if you will. So this would essentially be a conveyor belt that would eliminate any risk of accidents to workers, and at the same time more efficiently distribute the caustic soda. Now, one of the things I didn't budget here, but I have marching orders from the municipal authorities to apply for a grant through the Pennsylvania Small Water and Sewer Grant Program. So hopefully that cost. The reserve fund is there's really not, because now this is just we just transfer money from the sewer capital reserve fund to the municipal authority. So this shows the projects that would be funded from that transfer. But importantly, the fund balance in the year end right now is about $2.3 million. So we do have a cushion there to lend ourselves money if there's overruns at West Goshen. And last but not least, the operating reserve fund is our rainy day fund that we use to sort of offset the need for tax increases. We'll have about $2.6 million in the bank. You see interest income is starting to level off because the rates are falling. But we still have a healthy balance there. So that's really all I have for the proposed budget. The formal steps after we get public comment and comments from the board, the next step would be to the board pass a motion authorizing advertisement of the budget in the Daily Local News.
Thank you, John. Are there any comments or questions from the board? Well, I haven't gotten to I'm asking the board first. Okay, anyone from the audience have a question? If you do, please come up and.
Dan True at 1430 Grand Oak Lane. Sorry, I've got so many comments lately, but I've been home a lot more than I usually am. My hobby, of course, lately I've been reading impeachment transcripts and township budgets and things like that. The numbers are pretty impressive, and in fact, I've got a request that you may not like. But as I looked at it, I saw you've got in total $18 million sitting in the bank, right? Actually, over 20 if you count the bond fund. Yeah. And you've got the operating reserve fund maxed out by state law. So when I read that this afternoon online on the website, I thought, if there's a maximum on the operating reserve fund, isn't there some kind of a maximum on the general fund? Because otherwise, why bother having a
you're right. There is no, state law does not limit how much your fund balance can be. So, theoretically, it's limitless, but you're right, Dan. Philosophically, there's an important thing. You want to balance, having ample fund balance for that rainy day against the fact that it's taxpayer dollars. So, and it's that we're aware of that philosophically. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, thanks for leading me right on my request. So, as I looked at it, I called a friend of mine out in Harrisburg. When I was in Harrisburg, there was a lot of times when the state ended the year with less than $5.5 million in the bank. Now, I don't think they were a great model of how to manage your finances. You guys do a much better job. But when you get to $18 million total, and I know you can only spend certain money on certain things, but you got $7.5 million of operating funds. At some point, you have to say, maybe we need to tweak back the the property tax a little bit. And so my request is for you to consider lowering the millage rate from 1.25 to 1.0. That would reduce our revenue by about $400,000 over the next year. And if you look at your projections in the past, you always project a minor deficit and then we end up coming out in the black anyway. I mean, I think we should perhaps intentionally draw down the fund balance just a little bit. Because I know you're saying about 9 years out, you see a potential problem, but I'm only asking for, a quarter of a mil here. I think it would be nice to return some of that back to the taxpayers in the township and just demonstrate how well you guys have run things. And again, when I talked to my friend out in Harrisburg this afternoon, when I asked the question, I said, is there a cap on the general fund balance? He goes, let me call the local government committee and find out for you. So I waited, he called me back. And he said, it's 20, he says, oh, your operating fund balance can't be more than 20, your operating reserve can't be more than 25%. I said, that wasn't the question I asked. He said, I didn't think it was. He says, it's like they didn't understand the question out there. They just can't believe that anybody, I told him what the numbers were. He said, I can't believe anybody would be in the position that you guys are in. So kudos to you for putting us into such good financial shape. And my request is just, can we look at maybe 1/4 of a point knocking off of the millage rate? Thank you.
Thanks, Dan.
Thank you.
Hi, Joe Curlin, 1528 Bryant Drive. I had a quick question for you, sir. Who does your investments, invest all the funds?
Sure. So we use what's called the Pennsylvania Local Government Investment Trust, which is basically, as its name implies, for school districts, townships, cities, authorities. And it complies with Act 10 is the Pennsylvania law that basically sets the parameters for what municipal or public entities can invest in. And so it's your standard, plain vanilla stuff, AAA rated commercial paper, treasuries, Pennsylvania debt, CDs. So they're managing the actual money on a day-to-day basis. But that's a giant trust, that has, of which we are, 0.1% of the total pot of money. So.
And the state restricts you to do that?
Yeah, yes.
Okay.
Well, technically we could, there are banks that offer investment vehicles too, but the returns that Pliget offers are more competitive than the banks by 20 or 25 basis points.
Yeah.
So.
Okay, so you could consider an investment advisory house.
That's a good question. I think yes. The simple answer is yes. But when we've looked at that in the past, the documents that they ask us to sign, I'm not comfortable signing. Let's put it that way.
Mm-hmm.
They say things like, "You give us the unfettered right to invest in mutual funds and stocks and futures," and they say, "Oh well, we'll never do that," but I still have to sign a piece of paper that said that. So that is not something I'm comfortable signing.
All right, and what's been the ROI on the monies that you've invested?
So that's a good question. So every quarter we report what the yield is on township funds, and it's fallen. It got up to like a high of like 2.7 about a year ago. Now it's fallen to about 2.2, and it's probably going to fall further as some of the CDs that we have mature in the next couple of months. But we can't for obvious reasons, and we don't want to. I don't want to play the game of investing in the stock market and all of a sudden facing a 30% loss. I mean, not only do I don't want to do that, state law prohibits it, so it's a non-starter.
But insurance companies have guaranteed accounts. Have you ever considered those?
Yes, but the insurance, but with the Act 10 restrictions, that insurance coverage would eat into your.
No, it's not insurance coverage, it's investments.
Right, but wouldn't be allowed under, so if Act 10 wouldn't allow it to the extent, so either Act 10 wouldn't allow it, your yield. So basically by investing in this large Pliget trust, which as I said, we are just 0.1% of the entire pie, it spreads our risk. So, we don't get caught by some bank in Arizona all of a sudden going belly up.
Thank you.
Leo Sinclair, Lockwood Green. First, I want to reiterate what Dan said. I've been saying for the last 2 years, if we lower the property rate, it would be very helpful. If you want to try to sell your Goshenville, I think that would be a major plus on that point alone. So I kudos to him for saying that. I'm raising the question of the ladies in the back, want to bring forward. Regarding our trash, currently we have trash pickup twice and recyclables once. Why can't we just go down to one day a week for trash removal also, and see if we can cut the costs?
Well, I can't, I'll answer the first part. It's a policy question, so I can answer the second part. The first part is we're under contract through 2021. So, but your larger question, that's.
Rick has a wonderful answer. We looked into that before, and you would think that if you went to once a week, it would cut your costs in half, but you don't, because you still got the same amount of trash. And the other challenge you run into.
Based on tonnage then.
Yeah, so we pay the tipping fee at the landfill. The other challenge is the way we have it set up now, where and next year we flip. So if you were on the Monday, Tuesday.
No, don't do that.
No, we flip. We equal opportunity.
I'll give you $10, please.
But anyway,
I'm not even enjoying it now.
The challenge is we split the township into two sectors, they're both fairly even. And what that does is allows the hauler, basically, so when he hires crews, he basically can allocate 2 crews to East Goshen, and basically they're working almost 5 days a week. They have two days of refuse on one end and trash, 2 days of refuse recycling on the south end, and then Wednesday's usually the leaf collection day, or every other Wednesday's the leaf collection day. Then on Thursday and Friday they're at the north end. So it helps keep our costs down. But most of the people, last time we looked at this, do not want to get rid of the 2 days a week.
Okay. Last question is just request that you move some items to the front page. For instance, the budget, the overlay. I mean, there's links you can easily.
Oh, we put it on the front page.
Yeah, that's no problem. We'll do that tomorrow. Yeah, okay.
Thank you very much.
Michelle for working very grandiloquently. I wanted to ask Rick or John, how much is it I forgot to ask, a ton of trash to be removed?
I want to say it's like 90 per ton, something like 95 per ton. It's roughly 3 times more to process trash than recycling.
Okay. And what is the tipping fee?
That's in the trash. That is
That's part of that amount?
No, that is what you asked.
That's the cost
That's
we
the
pay.
tipping fee. I see.
We pay to the county to dump trash.
That's what the definition of tipping fee is.
Okay, thanks, okay. And we had talked earlier about potentially eliminating glass from the recycling, but if glass were eliminated from recycling, it's just gonna end up going to the trash, and it costs more money.
Yeah, exactly.
So-
You're getting on it's like this paradox.
Yeah.
And and just to fill in the gap here, right now you would think it would be plastics, but it's actually glass is the hardest material to recycle. It's also the most expensive. So right now there's really no market for recycled glass. So if we eliminate glass from recycling, yes, we would save some money on recycling, but it would get diverted to the trash, and so then you're paying more money.
It costs more.
Yeah, so
Okay.
it's
So that's right.
damned if you do, damned if you don't.
And then regarding the trail, the same engineering firm that underestimated the total cost of segment B is by like 1.5 million, is also the same firm that's submitting proposals to manage other sections. Has that been
Yes.
considered?
Yes, McMahon, yes. McMahon has done the estimates, prepared the trail program, and is doing the inspection.
Okay, so even though he was really underestimating segment B, he's still being considered.
The underestimated construction costs, yes.
Okay, so would it be, behoove us maybe to consider another firm that,
The part of the challenge is that when since they designed the project, because C, D, and E is connected to F and G, and they're all under the same permit, since they designed the project, it's all on the permit, they have to sign off on the back end anyway. So the only way they're gonna sign off on the permit is if they end up inspecting.
They're required to sign off on the design.
This all goes back to the Clean Water Act, 1972, where the river caught on fire. EPA came out and passed a law about we're gonna clean up the rivers, and which now means that's why when you put an addition on your house, you now have to do stormwater. That's why when somebody builds a new house, they have to put the stormwater. It's just the same thing with the sewer plants, with the upgrades to the sewer plants. It all flows back to the Clean Water Act, and essentially what we're doing now, we're paying for the sins of our forefathers. Because when they built in the 1930s, 40s, and 50s, and Howell Scour development, and sewage was, management of sewage was poor. We're now left to clean up the mess, and that's all part of that process.
And Mark, we're starting to say about the permitting process.
Oh, so McMahon, they're the design engineer, so at the back end, since we have a federal grant, so there are good things and there are challenges with grants as well, because the amount of hurdles you have to go through for federal money is enormous. And one of those things is the designer has to be on the hook for every step of the project.
Okay.
And to give McMahon some credit on, these are enormous projects with a lot of unknowns until you start getting a test probe in the ground to determine what kind of soils you have, where the stormwater needs to go, what kind of soils are there, how we're going to design it. The construction costs are an estimate. They're an estimate based on the best possible information you have at the time. When we were doing the trail plan, we knew where we wanted to put it. We had a concept. We didn't know what type of clay layer we were going to have in the soils. We knew we had to cross a wetland. We didn't know how significant that wetland is. The soil borings that we've done out there have determined that, it's going to be significant pilings we're going to need to do there to cross that creek in segment B. So those costs, we're getting much better idea of what those costs are going to be in segment B. C is a huge, CD and E is in the PennDOT right away. So you're subject to every PennDOT requirement, every DEP requirement, every single thing. The book is big. It's a very thick book. Every single page, you just cost more money. Every single page you go through to design these projects. And they do their best to determine. And at 1.5 million, it is a lot, but the cost of materials have gone up significantly over 6 years that we've been planning this project. So,
okay. And then I know that for other projects, I know that some of the language has been changed for various projects to say that it shall not exceed this amount. Is that something that we're dealing with?
That's what we just did.
It is.
That's what we just did tonight when we approved the contract.
so that's the inspection and construction services.
But it didn't say that in there, that it would not exceed.
Yeah, it did not say it at our last meeting. We went back and had them add that.
Okay, I was just making sure that was clear. I'm reading
That's
all this stuff.
basically,
Sorry.
that's basically our quasi-project manager from McMahon, who is a certified PennDOT inspector, who is going to oversee the PennDOT and the contractors that are out there. Also going to take care of all the administrative end. So because the grant comes with all those strings attached, there is so much paperwork and different things that have to be done through the PennDOT ECMS service, which is contracting website and contracting software. I don't know how to run that software. To be honest, he does it every day. So the efficiencies that are going to be gained there are going to be huge. And the quicker he can submit things and get questions answered by PennDOT, the quicker the project could go.
And he already
keep the
has a
costs down.
relationship, okay.
Oh, absolutely.
Then, and then somebody had asked me, and she was unable to stay. She asked me about parking along the trail. Is there gonna be any parking provided at any point along the trail?
No.
I just wanted to make, she's probably
That's not the
watching.
case. That's not
Just wanted-
exactly true. I mean, here at the township building, you
You're
can
the
park.
township building, you can
You don't
have.
have access to the trail here. There's
That's
also
fair.
parking at the park. You
Okay.
can cross with the new traffic
But,
signal. at
but
the
there's
park.
not gonna be any
It's
new
not
car.
specified trail parking,
Yeah,
that's
yeah,
fine.
no.
There's no new
Like I
car.
said, she's probably watching, she just wasn't staying. Okay, great, thanks.
All right, is there a motion?
Yes, I will, Madam Chair, I will make a motion to authorize the staff through Mr. Smith and Mr. Alshaw to place public notice for public comment, 20-day period, and consideration for adoption of the budget at the December 10th or December 3rd meeting, 2020 budget.
Is there, okay. Any discussion? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion is approved.
John, outstanding job. Rick, thank you.
Let me say one thing for the benefit of people that are here. Mike over there is usually the only person that ever shows up for these meetings when they're doing the budget, so I thank everybody that came tonight for sticking around to see what was going on. We have a finance committee consisting of John, obviously, and Ricky, myself, and Dave Shuey, and John does most of the work. And you see, or those that are here at our meetings, you'll see that we get a report every month from John and John's people, with respect to what was spent, where it was spent, who it was spent on, so forth and so on. So we have a continuous record of what's going on during the course of the year. In May, I don't know if you picked up on this, but we all the supervisors and the finance committee meet here to go over what we believe is going to be necessary going out for the next 5 years with a degree of certainty, and the next 10 years with a little less certainty. So that's very important for us to know, because it affects what we have to do when we have to do it, particularly with respect to the capital reserve and what we spend money on the capital side, because the operating side pretty much takes care of itself, because you got to keep operating. Now, the tricky part about all this for John is when it gets to be July, we have asked him if he would tend to project what he thinks the end of the year balance is going to be. And there's a good reason for that. And that is that we can make adjustments if things get out of hand for whatever the reason is. That usually doesn't happen, but it could happen. Now, as the further he gets towards the end of the year, the better his estimate is. So we are very fortunate that he's pretty good at doing this. And I want to thank John, and I want to thank Rick and the others in the staff for the work that they put in. Because I will tell you that we can't function now because we're basically a built-out, livable community. And you can't function without the dollars. And you don't have a lot of the construction dollars coming in that we had before. So it is a challenge to manage the money. It's a challenge to manage it against what we need to do. So that's what happens. So you have, fortunately, with Rick and John, you have really people that know what they're doing with municipal financing. And I want to second what Mike said earlier. It is something that other people talk to our people about, and we are very fortunate to have them. We understand, Dan, what you're talking about. There's a philosophical thing that John talks about how you do this, and some have one way and some have the other way. You can talk to your people in the face, and you're never going to convince those that feel one way versus the other way of which way to do it, because that's just the way they feel. So I just want to let people know that you can be sure, as some of the folks have said tonight, that the money in this township is managed really fairly, responsibly, and is a #1 priority, so that we can provide the services to the folks out there that they really want. I just wanted to say that before we move on, because I think it's only fair for you to know that behind the scenes, not only the two folks up here tonight, but the people that work for them really keep us going, and they do a great job.
Thank you, Marty.
Thank you, Marty, well said.
Okay, let's move on. Now we need to consider a date for the 2020 annual planning session.
Did somebody think about one in the meantime?
What?
Did you think
Do
about
we
one?
have,
Well, we normally meet on the we have to meet on Monday, first Monday in January to reorganize. We could do it on the first Tuesday, or the fallback would be either the second Tuesday. But if we do the second Tuesday, then Mike has a conflict. So it's either the first Monday or the fourth Monday in January, the fourth Tuesday in January. Third Tuesday or fourth Tuesday in January. This is the planning session.
planning session?
I'm gonna suggest the fourth Tuesday in January.
I don't think we move it back.
Well, the challenge is that the attendance has gone down, and the board asked, so we surveyed.
No, I mean, I think there's a lot of things that happen in the beginning.
So we'll go
So
to the
if
fourth,
we move it back a little bit.
we'll go to the fourth Tuesday in January.
Do we need a motion for that?
Well, if you're disagreement, we'll be here.
I say, what about the third Tuesday, because usually that's when we're not working, when we're not meeting.
No,
We
that's-
meet, or we're not.
we do need the third.
You're talking about the second or fourth, right?
Yeah, so there's.
If I had a choice between two, I'd take the fourth.
Fourth Tuesday,
That's the
All right.
28th.
28th.
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay. Next. This is Wiggins, they requested every year.
The same request as we do every year with the same conditions, what I have to do.
Okay, there's a motion, is there a second?
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. We have a recommendation for a proposal to prepare appraisals for the Paoli Pike Trail Segment A.
We're recommending we go to use Coil. They did this, they're on the PennDOT approved list.
How successful were they into avoiding, I guess you have to go to court, right, someone?
Well, we didn't have to take any, we didn't have to, right, Mark?
So we were very successful, and we didn't have any court proceedings for any of these easements in the CD&E. Coil is highly recommended by our solicitor's office. Say they've seen them in action and they're the best in the business when it comes to defending their appraisals analysis. In the event that we were to have an issue, and we were certain that we were going to have some negotiation in CD&E because of Wall, because of the TD Bank, because of all the commercial properties, the shopping center, and everybody got an appraiser of their own, and they couldn't refute our appraisal.
Then I'd move, the point.
We
Point Coyle as the agent to do this, and I think it's very appropriate that we recognize that we didn't have to go to court. So,
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Any further discussion? Any comments? Okay, all in favor? Aye. Opposed? It is passed.
The next item is the replacement of a truck. Mark has suggested, recommended, the Fred Beans is.
John, is this the one we talked about the other day?
Yeah, this is the one that would be an upgrade from the F5 350 to an F550 to allow for, moving dirt and gravel without turfing lawns and things like that. Yeah, we've been talking about it for years.
Is this a brand new? Or is
This would be a replacement.
Well, yeah, they're replacement.
So
It's an upgrade replacement.
upgrade replacement. So and so the issue is it's being proposed in the 2020 budget, but because it takes 5 months for delivery of the truck, Mark wants to have it ready for the spring, planning and the landscaping sort of season, to put the order in now, so we get it in March or April.
I assume the original vehicle was depreciated.
Yes, yeah, absolutely, yeah.
This is more expensive, correct?
Correct.
And how much additional money are we going
It's like 30,000. 30,000, but for perspective, we had the roof replacement, we budgeted, we had $125,000 in the sinking fund, in the capital reserve fund, and it cost 50, so.
I was just looking at the incremental cost, because the incremental cost provides the opportunity to do a lot more with the same vehicle.
Absolutely,
Yeah, that's one of the.
All right, is there a second? Is there a second?
There wasn't a motion, I don't think. I will move that we purchase the Ford 550, F550 plow and spreader from Fred Beans, and intercon truck that fits it out in the amount of $79,541 net of the trade in the old Ford 350, and as recommended by staff.
I'll second.
All in favor? Opposed? It's carried.
And the next time we have stormwater agreements for 1305 Park Avenue, 1507 Green Hill Road, 1623 Williams Way, and 45 Sherman.
I'll make a motion, Madam Chair, to move board authorize chairperson yourself to execute the stormwater management operation and maintenance agreements for those properties 1305 Park Avenue, 1507 Green Hill Road, 1623 Williams Way, and 45 Sherman Drive.
Is there a second?
Second.
Discussion, all in favor?
Those agreements, by the way, are an example of what Mark was, and Rick, I guess, were talking about with the changes in, from the clean, starting with the Clean Water Act and impervious surfaces, managing water.
At this point, we do not have any other matter, but is there any public comment on non-agenda items?
I'll make a motion
Wait a
to,
minute, wait a minute.
no, I want to go home.
You're not allowed.
Don't you?
We have correspondence. I just want to note correspondence. A notice of intent from West Whiteland Township to apply for a PennDOT multimodal grant. They are going to make improvements on Ship Road near where it intersects Route 30. The basic concept, as I understand it, is northbound is going to be one way along what is currently Ship Road, and southbound will be an additional road that goes behind the Ship Inn and behind the chapel and comes down and meets it further south.
Very interesting.
So,
That's actually the other way.
Oh, it's the other one?
the other way?
Northbound will be around the Ship Inn and up Ship Road, and then southbound will be the existing Ship Road.
But it's a somewhat novel.
Yeah, we're calling it the Cutlet.
I hope it works.
Well, we'll see.
Yeah.
The developer's gonna do half of it and township's gonna get the rest.
So are they looking for a support from us?
No,
Just
she just let us.
No, according to this letter, Mark, it says, the Ship Road couplet consists of a single lane, one-way road for southbound Ship Road that would be located west of Ship Inn, north of Lincoln Highway, and behind St. Mary's Chapel, south of Lincoln Highway. So the southbound will be the single lane.
You went around the Ship Inn.
That's what it says. I know nothing. It'll be interesting.
Hello. I would like to know how the board can help facilitate a meeting of the planning commission coming to the pipeline task force to address the issues that I have with the TND overlay and the comprehensive plan. Because at the last Board of Supervisors meeting, when the plan was presented, afterwards, I approached the 3 planning commission members to invite them. And I asked them, are you the planning commission? And the answer that I got was maybe. They would not identify themselves to me.
If you wish to speak to the planning commission, they have open public meetings.
No, that's not it. I would like the planning commission to come to the pipeline task force meeting and present their plan to us so that we as a group can discuss it in relation to the ordinance, which I've been corresponding with you about. I don't want to attend their meeting individually. I would like to help. I would like the help of this board.
The members of any interested party on the proposed COG ordinances attend the planning commission meeting and discuss it at that open meeting.
Why are they so hesitant to
No,
interact with us on this?
I don't even know that they are, but the normal way to do this, if it's a planning issue, it's a code issue, would be to go to the public meeting of the planning, talk to them about it. So
I agree.
I'm trying to invite them and they won't even identify themselves to us.
well, it's on the website. If you want to know who they are, you can talk to them if you want.
That's correct. I'm sorry, at the last Board of Supervisors, and I asked, are the 3 of you members of the Planning Commission? because I wanted to invite them to our pipeline task force meeting, and the answer that I got was maybe by one of them. The other two did not identify themselves.
From what I said, and David agreed with me, the proper way is for you to get your committee and attend.
But in all respect,
Okay, so it's supposed to be a group outing, is what you're saying?
you're talking about the T&D ordinance?
Yes, that
All
was,
right, well, the T&D ordinance, there's gonna be a public hearing on December 17th, at which the board will consider adoption to consider T&D ordinance. So the planning commission is on with it.
I am trying to get a working, the two groups together.
Okay, then what'll happen is the solicitor has to put has to put the T&D ordinance in the appropriate form for adoption with the appropriate whereases. That ordinance will then go to the county planning commission for review and the township planning commission review. That ordinance will be on the planning commission's agenda for the first meeting in January, in December. So if the pipeline task force, first Wednesday, if the pipeline task force have concerns about that ordinance, then you should go to their meeting and voice your concerns.
I have been voicing my concerns.
No, you should go.
I have been voicing my
No,
concerns.
You should go to their meeting because they have to make a recommendation.
I was there and I stood up and I was the one that said, when I see this plan, all I see is red flag after red flag after red flag, because the pipeline safety issues that we're facing are not being addressed there. And what I've been trying to convey to the board is that our very next meeting on November 21st, our pipeline task force, we are going to be looking at an ordinance, a sample ordinance from Cato that literally talks about buffers and setbacks in relation to transmission lines. And I think that this is so relevant to the plan that's being literally pushed through at the speed of light. And all I'm asking for is time for our two groups to get, I'm not talking to you, right? I'm asking for our two groups to work together so that we can put forth the plan that is literally in the best interest of this township and the residents, not even the residents that are here right now, but the future residents who might be moving in here. And all I'm getting is people who won't identify themselves to me, and I'm getting no help.
You want the planning commission to come to your meeting?
That's all I'm
So
asking.
Mark, come and ask.
Mark, let me suggest, Christina, if you would have the chair of the Christina, if you would have the chair of the pipeline task force contact through Rick as necessary, the chair of the planning commission to see if a meeting can be set up, or that the planning commission would invite the task force to its next meeting and have a session prior to the regular agenda or something like that. But let the chairs talk to them, to each other and see what happens.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you. That is all I was asking. Thank you.
Thanks, Christine.
Is there a motion to adjourn?
The notification,
I missed one?
We submitted an application to DEP for the Poetry Pond, and McMahon has submitted an notice to DEP of intent, a notice of intent to apply for a permit for a segment A meter trail. This is fact, we have to know, if you apply for a permit, DEP, you have to have proof that you notified the municipality.
Okay. All right, now is there a motion to adjourn?
another example of the paperwork.
Yes. Is there a motion to adjourn? Is there a second? All in favor? Aye.
Opposed.
Let's keep going.
Put on there, they said Wednesday.
Take care, guys.
Thanks again for meeting with this week.
Oh, sure.
I went to one and I didn't get to put on my calendar.